Good evening. It's Pastor Ray, Bethel Lutheran Church. It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday evening, and we had talked about trying to get together as a community online to talk a little bit about when and how we might begin to reopen church, how we might imagine that to be. You need to know that we've not only been in prayer about this and in just a lot of thought, but also a lot of consultation, a lot of talking with other pastors, trusted colleagues, recommendations from the state of Ohio Public Health, CDC, our church leadership in terms of our bishop and our presiding bishop out of Chicago. I am in many ways just starting this conversation with you. We'll continue to have moments like this where we talk about worship, where we talk about what's going to happen. This is an ongoing and evolving thing. Tonight, there are no solid or firm answers to probably many of the questions you're thinking about or asking, but I'm going to try at least to begin to address some of the concerns, some of the things that we know that we're going to have to address at some point. So the first thing I think it's important to do is I'm going to talk about a lot of different things tonight in regards to worship and when we begin to think about gathering together as a community of faith. I want to thank Pastor John Morris, Pastor Jim Wilson, and some other colleagues. I am really running off of a template that was shared with me as I had a meeting with Pastor Morris and Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in Dublin, Ohio, as they also, as really every church is trying to figure out how to most faithfully and carefully reopen. So I do want to thank them. I am going to miss a lot of things, and I really encourage you to email me, text me, call me, whatever you need to do to get more clarity. But know again, this is just the beginning. We still have to work through our church leadership, our church council, through all of this before we make any firm decisions. But I know a lot of people have been waiting to hear maybe where we're going, what direction are we heading. So when we start gathering together, and in most significantly and in particular when we gather inside to worship, and let me say this clearly, it's no mystery that gathering inside in a confined space for any length of time is the worst thing we can do as a people for safety purposes, right? People are encouraged to be outside if they gather, always social distancing, all of these things. And so we're keeping that certainly in mind. When we begin to worship, you need to know that the only way you'll be allowed to worship is if you wear a mask. I know in some corners that's a debate. In this church, it's not a debate. To worship here at Bethel Lutheran Church means you have to wear a mask to enter for worship. I will talk about that. I will continue to repeat that time and time again, but know that that will be a requirement, not a recommendation, not an ask, a requirement to worship inside on a Sunday morning. I'm asking that everybody who decides to come to worship, and not everybody will decide to come inside to worship, but if they decide to come to worship, to take your temperature beforehand and make sure that you're not running a high fever in any way, shape, or form. I would also recommend to you the CDC guidelines in regards to high-risk groups. I'm in a high-risk group, pretty much the highest risk group, and so I can appreciate this. But just to rattle some things off, if you're 65 and older, you should strongly consider not coming inside to worship. It's your decision, but I'm just saying that these are things we have to consider. 65 and older, people who are in a nursing home or in a long-term care facility, if you have lung disease, severe asthma, heart conditions, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, or liver disease, if you are immunocompromised, that's a problem, and you need to think about that. Immunocompromised, of course, are people like me who take drugs after an organ transplant, some people who are going through cancer treatments, etc. Any kind of immunodeficiency, you need to really think about whether or not you're going to come inside here to worship. This is why, my dear friends, we have online options currently, right now, in the midst of this pandemic. We have Facebook Live worship, which is then posted to our website, which is also then going to our YouTube channel. So all of these things, please take advantage of, especially if you're not comfortable in coming back to church in the near future. That's why we have it. We want you to be part of our community, but we know that not everybody can come back right now, or even in the near future, of which really I'm talking about. Once people enter the building, whenever we start worshiping inside, again, I'm going to say this time and time again, you're going to have a mask on. If you choose not to wear a mask, I or Pastor Wise will ask you to leave our building. I don't want to have to do that. No one wants that. But these are the things that we have to do. We have to wear masks. The only people that won't have a mask on from time to time would be the preacher for the day, the presider for the day, and only when they're in the chancel area. If they're not in the chancel area, even pastors will have a mask on. Ward Matthias, our organist, when he's at the piano bench or at the organ bench, he will be allowed to take his mask off, but otherwise will have a mask on. The same with Alex, our choir director. If he's leading us in song, he can take his mask off, but otherwise he'll have a mask on as well. We're serious about this. We want to keep everybody safe. You'll have entry at both our north and south doors. We're not having a one-way in and one-way out kind of thing that you might see at a grocery store or another place of business. We'll do that, but we'll have sanitation stations at each entry. We'll have sanitation throughout this church, all new. There'll be a lot of stations where you can use hand sanitizer. Of course, we're always encouraging the washing of your hands, etc. We'll have hospitality and safety ushers, for lack of a better phrase, that will help everyone enter and exit the building safely and appropriately. While we're worshiping, you'll need to know that we'll have no nursery available for young children. We'll have no assistants in worship. There'll be no acolytes, no assisting minister, no ushers, no communion assistants. Nothing like that, at least temporarily, while we figure this out further and as we progress with all of our safety measures. We will not be opening our restrooms to normal use. Restrooms will be closed off unless it's an emergency, and then we'll allow, obviously, that option, but we'll be restricting that, and we'll have hospitality safety people at our restrooms to monitor that. And again, there's going to be all kinds of more specific details to come. When you leave worship, there'll be no receiving line. You'll just exit the building, go to your car, or you can do outside fellowship. But there'll be no fellowship inside this building for the time being. It pains me to say that because we're such a friendly church. We're such a church that wants to, I don't know, embrace one another, hug one another. It's hard to do, but that's going to be part of our new reality once we start worshiping together. I need to say this too. Once we start worshiping inside, if we can't do this properly, if we can't in some ways follow the rules, and gosh, that sounds very school-like and teacher-like, but because safety is such an important issue for us, if we can't do these things and do them specifically and every Sunday, then we're not going to be able to have in-person worship. And so that's going to be something that we need to consider as well. So, Pastor Ray, when are we doing all this? It's not soon. One of my concerns is what we just went through with Memorial Day weekend. We know, including myself and my family, we had a certain amount of cross-pollination. My son came home. He came home by way of West Virginia and his girlfriend's house, but came to us from Washington, D.C., a hotbed for coronavirus. Now, we social distance. I didn't touch my son, kept my distance, things like that. But nonetheless, during Memorial Day weekend, when there was more social activity than normal, I'm waiting to see whether or not there is any kind of spike in coronavirus infections. And so we'll be monitoring that and watching that along with the rest of the world, I'm sure. So we will consult with the church council, but don't expect us to begin inside worship until July 5th. July 5th is when I think we can begin to worship inside. Now, I do think in 2 weeks, when we have some sense of whether or not there's any kind of increase in infections, we can begin worshiping outside. And I want to explain what I mean by that, outside. We are blessed with a certain amount of land. Now, in some ways, we had all planned to, at some point, have another bit of our building built in terms of a large fellowship area that we could use for a variety of different things. Obviously, that's on hold right now. So we have land right behind the narthex. And so what we're going to do is paint circles in our backyard here at church. And I don't know if anyone has seen pictures of the San Francisco park system, but you'll see that there are circles specifically designated for people and families to sit in that are socially distanced apart from each other. That's what we're going to do beginning the second Sunday in June for anyone who wants to come and worship outside. Now, how do you worship outside? Well, you'll have your device. You'll be able to watch what's going on inside. We're also going to put those big speakers that we had in the fellowship hall that we bought so that people could hear us when we're having events in the fellowship hall. But now we're going to use those, put them outside, broadcast what's happening inside, and at least people can sit outside, pray prayers with us, follow the liturgy, sing hymns with us. Participate at least in some kind of way if you choose to do so, if you feel safe in doing that. But we want to open up our lawn for worship the second week of June. And if you're comfortable to do that, I encourage you to join us. Again, we'll have circles designated, space designated for people who are comfortable to do that. We're always trying to figure out what is going to be the safest environment for our people. I want to wrap this up because you've been very patient as I've kind of rambled on about church and how we're going to try to reopen eventually. We'll be doing this again, obviously, as we get closer to July 5th from an inside standpoint. And I'll do this again, obviously, before we begin our outside worship the second week of June. In no way is this a conclusion. This is the final act in anything. Church has changed. Church has changed forever. I think we need to hear that clearly. It doesn't mean we'll never get back together with a full sanctuary of glorious singing folk, doing liturgy, listening to sermons, having children's time, all those things. I look forward to that. I anticipate that. I just don't know when that's going to be. And so in the meantime, we're going to do everything we can to do the best we can at worshiping. That's online right now. That's going to be outside next. And then it's going to be both kinds of things. Inside, outside, online worship, all these options for people, because we are in a strange and rare time of being the church. I continue to ask for your prayers. I continue to solicit your understanding. I ask for you to contact the church if you have any questions or concerns. You can call me personally. You can call Pastor Wise personally anytime, 24/7. We want to continue to be here as your church, as your pastors, as the staff of Bethel Lutheran Church. We care about you. We love you in the name of Jesus Christ. We want this to work out for all of us. But hear this clearly. My utmost concern for you is your safety. It's my safety as well. The whole community rests on the fact that we must love our neighbor. To love our neighbor means to do these very safe things. It may not be cool or whatever to wear masks. I don't care. I think that biblically, theologically, ecclesiastically, I can use a lot of words that ends with ly, but here's the thing. We are called to love one another, be safe, care for one another. There's a lot more for us to do. There's a lot more for us to talk about. This is the 4th time I've been on Facebook Live today. A daily check-in, a Bible study at 11, with our kids at 4 o'clock, and now at 7. I'll be checking in tomorrow at 10 o'clock again. It's important that we do this. It's important that we stay connected as a community. I am committed to you. I am committed to this church, as I know you are committed to me and Pastor Wise and this church. Fight the good fight. Join me in being faithful, in being safe, in saying you were a part of this rare and unique time of being church, and we prevailed. Because God is on our side, and Jesus always prevails. That is the good news of the gospel, and that is what we will continue to proclaim day in and day out. Join me as we do that. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'll do this again and often as we get closer to the second week in June and the first Sunday in July. Thank you so much. God bless you, and have a great evening. Goodbye now.